that you go full screen on it.
That's fine.
That's what it's. I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to display though.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know. It usually
Is that Zoom?
No, it's PowerPoint. It only usually does that when I'm hooked up to HDMI or that I don't know.
Yeah, it's sharing your full screen, so it's going to share what's on here, not what's on there. So you can't disable that or anything?
Well, I don't know.
There we go.
All right.
Well, at least we can edit this part out. Okay, we should be good to go.
Is that good enough? All right. Hi, my name is Ed Mills. I'm with FirstNet Colorado. I am the Outreach and Education Manager for our initiative here to bring public safety broadband network to the state of Colorado. A little bit about myself. We are out of the Governor's Office of Information Technology. Prior to coming to the state to do outreach and education, I was a military policeman for 6 years. Also a counterterrorism specialist. I specialize in technology such as Raman technology, ITMS, which stands for Ion Trace Mobility Spectroscopy, and acoustic wave. I'm also a firefighter with Evergreen Fire Rescue, and so some of the illustrations I give will be from the fire service.
Hi, my name is Kim Coleman-Madsen. I'm the Public Safety Broadband Program Manager at the Governor's Office of Information Technology. I have about 20 years experience in public safety, starting first with the Public Safety Answering Point or 911 Center at Vail Police. I also worked for the City and County of Broomfield as a dispatch supervisor. My experience in 2008 shifted to working on the statewide digital trunk radio system, or DTRS, where I was the policy and project manager. And I was also involved in statewide interoperable communications planning through the SWIC office. We're here to talk with you today about FirstNet. FirstNet is the First Responder Network Authority. It's an independent authority within the U.S. Department of Commerce and National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or the NTIA. And FirstNet is tasked with legislatively, since 2012, planning for, deploying, and eventually operating the very first public safety broadband network that will be dedicated for use by public safety. We do believe that if it's done correctly and involves participation with local, state, and federal government equally, it will allow communities and public safety response agencies to solve more crimes, save more lives, and keep their communities safer.
We have a short video to share with you. This is from FirstNet.
They're looking for a DUI motor on Onset 70.
Stand 582 25th Street, Sylvia. I've got a brown Ford Ranger pickup.
At the scene of an incident, you need information. This job requires you to be connected at all times. The First Responder Network Authority, or FirstNet, will build a network to give you the connectivity you need to make life-saving decisions. FirstNet is working to put the most advanced technologies at your fingertips. Access to a reliable broadband network will connect you to databases to get the valuable information you need. FirstNet will also connect you to other law enforcement partners. Whether operating on a multi-agency incident or simply sharing data in your own department, FirstNet will bring law enforcement and other public safety disciplines together like never before.
You need a broadband network that can be built sufficient for the standards. You need a network that can survive a natural disaster and won't be subject to bugs, virtual. In short, we do need FirstNet. That's simple.
First responders need the very best tools we can put in their hands. First responders need FirstNet. Find out more at www.firstnet.gov.
So what we're really talking about is providing public safety responders with the right information in real time as authorized to save lives and property. And the technology is already there. Unfortunately, we have to use commercial networks to do certain things. So for example, as a volunteer firefighter, we have applications that we use, and even before a tone goes out, I can get a text and an email that tells me the details about that call. It opens up an application on my cell phone with a commercial network, and I can press a button that says I'm into that call. One of the great things about that then is it'll open up into Google Maps, and it'll give me turn-by-turn direction as I'm running code. Also, the PSAP, or our dispatch center, they can actually watch me in Google Maps and see as I go to the scene. So there's no question about what my estimated time of arrival is. When I get on scene, I can press another button. It lets the CAD know that I am on scene, and all along that application keeps an updated total and gives me the necessary CAD data that I need for that scene. At that point, I'll pull up my land mobile radio, and I'll give a size up of what's on the scene. So what we're really here to talk to you about is it's all about data. And just a few statistics, not to belabor the point, but you know, global data has been growing, and we've seen an exponential increase. So global mobile data traffic grew 69% in 2014. And the last year's mobile data traffic was nearly 30 times the size of the entire internet network in 2000. And that mobile video traffic exceeded 50% of the total mobile data traffic for the first time in 2012.
Additionally, almost 500 million devices connections were added in 2014, and that was up from 6.9 to 7.4 billion across the world since 2013. Smartphones account for about 88% of that growth, with 439 million net additions in 2014.
And then the last one, before we move on, is that globally smart devices represent 26% of the total mobile devices and connections in 2014. And when you consider the bandwidth that takes up, that's going to become very important in the future. In the same period of time, smart devices account for 88% of the mobile data traffic. And in 2014, on average, a smart device generated 22 times more traffic than a non-smart device.
So I think we just made a case for you understanding the prolific adoption of data across the country. But not so long ago, remember, we thought we were pretty fancy there, Maxwell, with Get Smart using his shoe. And then if you fast forward to 2005, you have Pope Benedict's debut, and you'll see the flip phone on the lower right. And we really thought, you know, hey, we're getting connected to the internet, and that's a fantastic option. But now, even fast forwarding to 2013, which is 2 years ago, data devices are everywhere. We've adopted them in our personal lives. Professionally, we adopt them to the degree our agencies are able to support, endorse, or fund that adoption. But oftentimes in public safety, we are slow to adopt technologies that can really serve and support us in instances like this. And this is the Boston bombing. Unfortunately, the bombing presented a lot of challenges from a data perspective, accessing information. And why is it important that public safety first responders have the same capabilities? Because of people like this, who we'll talk about in a little bit, and ensuring that our responders actually use better capabilities professionally than the public or they use in their personal lives.
So there's a lot of reasons that we could go into why we need something like FirstNet, but we're going to give you three of the top ones. Commercial networks crash when too many users access the network. We found this in our community. In 2013, September, we had floods like a lot of the communities in Colorado. They were adversely affected by the floods. We were using all of our repeater channels on our land mobile radios. We, in some instances, went to simplex where it was appropriate. But the fact was, we just didn't have enough. We didn't have enough means to communicate. So we started to use our cell phones in the commercial networks. But the problem is that there were so many users that were in dire straits. They were in emergency situations themselves. They were on those commercial networks. And so we were getting busy signals, drop calls, and we were unable to use our cell phones on the commercial networks.
Additionally, commercial carrier networks actually are not hardened or as resilient as the future public safety broadband network would be, and actually to some degree they are just hardened as current voice or land mobile radio systems. Anecdotally, during Hurricane Sandy, the city of New York operates a municipal broadband network, and they were up 99.9% of the time, whereas the commercial carriers were down for anywhere from 36 to 48 hours. Why is that important? That's important because the broadband network there in New York, they had generator backup, they had battery backup, they likely had redundant routers, switches, that sort of thing, which really ensured that hardened or 5 nines reliability on a network. FirstNet proposes to provide that kind of data network to public safety.
And then the last one that we're going to talk about here is devices really don't stand up to first responder abuse. I can't tell you how many times I've dropped a phone on scene in the snow, in the dirt, in the mud, and they just won't stand up to the kind of abuse that we as first responders put them through.
We're going to provide you a couple of use cases so you understand how data might be better supported on a dedicated network. So with a dedicated broadband network, imagine a situation whether it's through pre-planned incident streaming video, whether it's through eventually someone from the general public taking a video, pushing that through the 911 system, 911 assessing or analyzing it, and then pushing it out over a network like FirstNet to first responders, or a first responder eventually getting on scene and taking video. We will have access to information that can inform our response in ways that we never have before. Additionally, we'll have enhanced GIS or GPS capabilities, which will really help paint that common operating picture more dynamically for the responders in the field. Imagine a situation where we know where we've located responders to manage the perimeter of an incident, and we know we are keeping the public generally in and out of. We know where our joint incident command center is, and we are able to map that information dynamically and then push it out to the responders in the field immediately. Imagine through Fusion Center analysis, we actually know who the bad guy is, and we're able to share that information quickly. Officer Collier with MIT during the Boston Marathon bombing was unfortunately a public safety fatality as a result of potentially not being able to share information about who the suspects were quickly and dynamically when authorities didn't know who they were looking for. So we really just want public safety responders and agencies to think about the context within which they can improve or enhance their operations with the advent of a dedicated broadband network.
And so not to leave out firefighters and personnel who go for rescues, we have one more use case.
West fire, the West fertilizer is one of their builds is on fire. There's heavy smoke coming out of the top of it. For us, just about to do that. West fire. This is in response to West fertilizer plant. They have a fire out there again. West fire out to West fertilizer plant.
So again, FirstNet envisions that they will be able to have a network where we can get that video. In this case, this came from people that were just passing by, or maybe that first responder on scene. We'll also be able to get information that we have to rely on right now, computer programs. We'll be able to get that information pushed out. In this incident, we have the explosion ratios. Right there you can see nursing home, very close, hospital, middle school, from the fertilizer plant, high schools in pretty close. We can also start to figure out where we're going to do triage, and as Kim was talking about, how are we going to get responders in and out of this incident so that we can deal with the mass casualties. And also we can get important information pushed out, the MSDS information, so we can find out what kind of ethyl-methyl bad stuff that we're dealing with. We know that even just a simple chlorine release into the air can kill thousands or tens of thousands of people in a very short time. So with the right information in real time, we can get that to responders on the scene. And that's really what it's about. We can also figure out what our other exposures are. In this instance, there was a gas main that exploded, which caused subsequent explosions. And so we can start to get a good lay of the land and figure out situationally what we need to do, what we may be dealing with here in the future, and it'll give us the right information when we need it the most.
Quickly want to share with you a myth and fact about current commercial carrier networks. Oftentimes public safety believes that they have access to a dedicated mission critical data network, just like their current land mobile radio systems, which are mission critical voice capable. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Currently, public safety relies on the same commercial carriers as the public. During a localized or major incident where there's extensive use of the cell sector or bandwidth, that really impacts public safety on a few fronts. Specifically, public safety has no priority or exclusivity or preemption or ability to control the quality of service across the network. And what does that mean practically or operationally? It means that the general public actually is competing with public safety for the same access to that cell sector or bandwidth. And an incident commander who's perhaps trying to download pre-plans or monitor an incident from a camera perspective is actually competing with some kids down the street who may be uploading iTunes or kiddie videos. And they have no ability to really preempt that traffic, those users or the applications that the general public are using that really aren't as critical as what public safety might be involved in. And so overall, the quality of service or the ability to manage the quality of the content, how quickly it is responsive to an incident's needs, is not available through a commercial carrier network. FirstNet proposes that priority, preemption, and quality of service will all be addressed and controlled locally to the degree it can from that technology perspective on a network like FirstNet.
So this is what commercial carriers sell. This is just to illustrate that there's supposed to be a big pipe out there where information goes in and information goes out. Unfortunately, this is what happens in the situations that we're talking about. This is actually a hurricane evacuation in Texas. And there you can see, there's the bus that's stuck in the same traffic that everyone else is. And I think most people would agree that we need to get first responders outside of that commercial network, that conduit that can get clogged. So we're not naive. We understand there are challenges, and the challenges at least are two. And that is that we have some urban bandwidth and in-building coverage things. There are some communities that are working on this throughout Colorado and the other nations or the other states and territories throughout the country. But also in the rural and wilderness area, we know that coverage is going to be an issue. And so we're working every day to address those concerns in both the urban and the rural and wilderness areas.
We want to reassure you that current and future investments in land mobile radio systems are important and should continue. Land mobile radio today is your only mission critical capability as a public safety first responder. And so what does that mean? That means that network is hardened, resilient, and dedicated to your agency and the responders in the field. In the future, FirstNet will be providing a hardened, resilient, and dedicated data network. However, it will not provide mission critical voice in the short term or initially in the deployment of the network. So we want to reassure agencies that continued investment in land mobile radio capabilities will be needed. And it really will take time, not only for FirstNet to deploy a nationwide network, but also for the requirements of public safety, like push to talk, like emergency button, like simplex or proximity services capabilities to be available on LTE or broadband. And as a result, public safety should continue to invest in the system.
So I think you'd agree with us. This is what we want for public safety. We want a conduit where information can be sent out and received, and where we're not going to get bogged down in the same commercial networks with the same traffic in those situations. So what is the NPSBN or PSBN? Well, it stands for the National Public Safety Broadband Network, or they call it FirstNet. It's a nationwide 4G LTE, that stands for long-term evolution-based wireless data network to be used by public safety entities and secondary use under covered lease agreements. We put up here the two reports, the 9/11 Commission report and Hurricane Katrina. And in both those reports, obviously, they had a lot of recommendations, but Congress was very concerned that first responders have a conduit where they can have interoperable communications, where fire can talk to police, police can talk to fire, EMS, the police, and you get the scenario. So anyway, even in our own state with the tragic events of Columbine, one of the issues in that, in the after action report, is that they had paramedics going into what was still considered a hot zone, but paramedics couldn't talk to police, police couldn't talk to paramedics. And even in that report, they said, this should not happen. Our first responders ought to have a platform where they can talk interoperably to one another. And so that is part of why FirstNet has gotten as far as it has. And here's one of the key statements from that 9/11 Commission report. It says, recommendation, Congress should support pending legislation which provides for the expedited and increased assignment of radio spectrum for public safety purposes.
Wanted to quickly give you some background about the law that enabled FirstNet. It came from the Spectrum Act, which was a portion of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, and it did a number of things. First, as mentioned earlier, it designated FirstNet as an independent authority within the NTIA. It also designated $7 billion for development of this network. That $7 billion we know will be inadequate to deploy a nationwide network. It's really meant to be seed money for FirstNet to do the full procurement that it needs to do to identify a partner or partner in the future deployment of that network. That $7 billion is available currently through spectrum auctions, and FirstNet is using it in their long-term planning, and there is not a concern from an overall financial perspective whether there will be money available for FirstNet. It is in the bank, so to speak. This act designated $135 million for state and local planning, which allows people like Ed and myself and our peers across the country to do comprehensive education and outreach process with as many public safety stakeholders as we can speak to. And then most importantly, it reallocated the 700 megahertz or D block spectrum. That spectrum is also referred to as band class 14. Those terms are often used interchangeably. And if you'll notice on this graphic, band class 14 is immediately adjacent to Verizon and AT&T spectrum that is used for LTE or broadband capabilities on those networks. I kind of liken this spectrum to Malibu beachfront property in the spectrum world. It's tremendously valuable, as demonstrated by the auctions that funded FirstNet in the past year or so. And so FirstNet has been licensed this spectrum by the FCC, and it is solely for the use of public safety broadband. We've kind of touched on a number of things when it relates to all of these topics that you see on this graphic. However, I do want to quickly hit on priority access, quality of service, and local control as it relates to a couple of things that are important to local agencies in Colorado as we plan for the network. Local control means that in the end, even though FirstNet's legislation mandates that they build a network across the country, the legislation does not mandate that any local or state agency use the network if it doesn't make sense to them. And what that means is, as a consumer of broadband services, they could choose to adopt or stay with a carrier like one of the major 4 carriers, or they could adopt FirstNet, who will be a like carrier. And in the end, if FirstNet fails to provide comparable coverage or compelling cost that would make sense for an agency to adopt the FirstNet network, then there is no obligation to do so. So FirstNet really has a large responsibility to ensure that they deploy a network that really makes sense for public safety, not only in every city and county across the states and territories as well. Local control also means that locally, FirstNet envisions that if we have an incident occurring, the cell tower is broken kind of into 3 sectors. And generally, day to day, those sectors are not, the bandwidth or the capability of that given area is not generally eaten up by all of public safety's traffic. However, if we have a localized incident and that bandwidth becomes consumed by public safety due to applications or streaming video as an example, then public safety would have the ability, in theory, to manage the users and applications based on the incident that's occurring. So that's what local control means for FirstNet from a broadband technology perspective. And it's important that you understand the value add that FirstNet believes this will bring to their network.
We've also talked about a lot of these things that we've listed here. We just put this up, you know, for your convenience. But we've already talked about enabling and improving situational awareness, and we'll talk about the rest of it as the presentation goes on. So just to reiterate, and what Kim had just touched on is, you know, we really don't have anything to sell you. We really don't want you to drink any Kool-Aid because it's basically going to come down to agency by agency. If FirstNet doesn't make a compelling argument for you to use their network and give you the kind of coverage and capacity that you require for your operations, you're under no obligation to use it. Just to reiterate what FirstNet is, you know, presently we have voice. That's that land mobile radio that you use, that radio in your car or your handheld, which gives you that mission critical voice capability. But we know that most of you have non-mission critical devices, whether it be a laptop at your desk, or whether they've given you a pad, or whatever it is, some sort of device. So in the near-term future, what FirstNet proposes is to give you a network that can give you robust data, so that you can have a network that you can count on, so that you can get that key information that you need for those incidents, whether it be that GIS data as we were talking about, or the bad guy, get a picture of him and get that distributed. And so FirstNet will provide emergency responders with the first nationwide high-speed wireless broadband network. And that network will be dedicated to public safety and to what public safety needs for operation. We won't go into great detail about this, but this is just to show you that, you know, 5% of the U.S. landmass is suburban, urban, and dense urban. And one of the great things about using a technology like this is that that infrastructure is largely already out there. Where the challenges come in is rural, 68% of the U.S. landmass. And then also, as we see here in Colorado, that designated wilderness, 27% of the U.S. landmass. And, you know, we believe that if it can be done in Colorado, it can be done anywhere. And so we work every day to make sure that we hear from you what you need operationally, what you need as far as coverage, and to give you the solutions you need. So quickly, we just put up here some things. There's microcells, usually in long-term evolution, they can go up to 1 mile. You hear a lot of talk about femto, pico, microcells. Those are smaller cells that can be put on the outside of a building or inside of a building on a wall. And so we see a lot of that to extend coverage. Also, those macro cells, LTE, up to 1 to 10 miles. We have public safety boomer cells, and those are traditionally, they go 10 to 25 miles. There's mobile communications with mobile comms mounted in vehicles. So as we go around and talk to 64 counties and 2 tribes, we're asking you what makes sense. Where do you want these? Where do you want to put eNode B so that you can extend the cell coverage range? Makes sense to put them in you know, engines or command vehicles for police, SWAT vehicles, etc. And then there's also a discussion going on all over the country about what kind of off-node communications can we have. Satellite is obviously an option that's being looked at. Or you'll hear us talk about COW, cell on wheels, or COLT, which is a cell on light truck vehicle. So there's all kinds of ways that we hope to bring this technology to you in the field.
There are also going to be a number of applications expected, not only through what applications may exist across the ecosystem today, but those that may be developed in the future. That kind of idea that if we build a network, applications or use cases for a myriad of applications we may not even know that could exist yet will come in the future. But today there are lots of applications that we know would exist and could ride across this network. Everything, as we mentioned, from video to CAD or RMS, to fire reporting, license plate readers, and then really advanced capabilities from the telehealth and biometrics and patient care reporting perspective. If you're interested in seeing what's occurring in the R&D space across public safety apps, you can go to APCO, the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials. They're the largest trade organization for dispatch and radio. They have a website called appclmm.org or appcom.org, and they're tracking a couple hundred apps that have not been vetted from a security perspective and are not necessarily endorsed by APCO or FirstNet. They give you an idea of what's out there and what may come in the future.
And this is basically how FirstNet intends to get to that number that we've talked about. As you can see on your left-hand side, there's your traditional, the law enforcement, fire, rescue, EMS, hospitals, dispatch, emergency managers. They threw in corrections. But there's a lot of other areas that FirstNet is looking in. Obviously, since this was started on a federal level to give that bandwidth, the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, Coast Guard, our Army, National Guard. Also, it makes sense looking into transportation, public works. When we go out on calls, you know, if I go out on an electrical call, somebody hit an electrical pole, first person that I call is Excel or one of the other majors, because we're going to need them on scene to shut off the electricity. Also, there's public health, you know, all kinds of utilities, security guards is another possibility, hospitals. Basically, as we go county to county, it's very important to us as a Colorado team working on FirstNet that you tell us who is a public safety entity and who needs to be on the system and provisioned on that system in your county.
We also want to ensure that you understand that we believe it all begins with the PSAP, or the 911 center. Across the country, 2/3 of calls received by 911 centers come from mobile devices. In Colorado, that number is much higher, in the 80 to 85% range. And the PSAP is going to be critical in this process. They are the receivers, analyzers, and disseminators of much of the information that we expect to travel a network like FirstNet. And so we want you to understand the importance of PSAPs participating in this process, as well as the synergies to be gained as PSAPs look at deploying next-gen 911 and their ESINet, which is an emergency services IP network. And that's really how they envision getting text and then future multimedia capabilities in from the public, analyzed by the PSAP, and out to the responder in the field.
So we have a short video back in February of 2015. The Alpine World Ski Championship was in Vail and Beaver Creek. And we want to show you a little bit about what we did as far as a demonstration network there. And then we'll talk to you on the back end about some of the specifics of that.
That video and other videos, and actually assessment by the Department of Homeland Security and the FirstNet Colorado team, Information on that network can be found on our website on the homepage, link to that network. To give you a quick synopsis of what occurred, through a public-private partnership involving multiple vendors, the town of Vail, Eagle County, and the FirstNet Colorado team, we were able to deploy a cell on wheels with its own virtual core network at the race finish in Beaver Creek, which was at about 9,000 feet and really in some challenging terrain. That network supported public safety responders and was networked back to the event command post in the Vail area. Within Vail, Crown Castle had deployed a commercially capable distributed antenna system, or DAS, that three of the 4 large carriers operate on, and we used 4 of those 29 sites to deploy a temporary public safety broadband network using the band class 14 spectrum. We operated about 35 ruggedized devices specific for public safety. We used 5 event cameras deployed by the FBI, and then we had multiple Wi-Fi hotspots, which enabled commercially, personally deployed or professionally deployed, but commercially capable public safety, or not public safety, commercially capable devices that already exist in the public space to use the band class 14 network. We deployed 2 applications, one called Dragon Force, the other called ES Chat, and those were available for responders to use for situational awareness and then push to talk or chat capabilities. Our primary goal was really to support crowd monitoring and traffic control. We really learned a few key things: that the technology performs well and really augmented the land mobile radio capabilities, especially in those challenging areas, and that we would not have been able to deploy this network without public or private assets quickly and efficiently and safely. The network was viewed as a must-have. Responders were disappointed to see it taken down and asked when it would be available in the future, which is why we know that when FirstNet is able to deploy the network, it will be welcomed. And then, as we mentioned, it was in a 2-week event, 2 terabytes of data almost, and that was really not even with specific dedicated and primary use of the network.
So just to give you a little bit about the timeline, on the national side, you can see the Miss Pac-Man or the Mr. Pac-Man there. We have been in the outreach phase since Kim and I started working with the state of Colorado, and you can see that blue bar underneath there. It's the state consultation process. This process is a dynamic process, so it changes from time to time, but there are some basic components that you need to be aware of. So in the outreach phase, we've just gone to 64 counties, 2 tribes, and we just want to let everybody know what it is and start to get their buy-in. By that, what we mean is we need your participation. For this thing to actually work, we are going to need you to tell us operationally what is it that you have to have, because we can sit around in our offices and guess what you need, but we know operation goes from agency to agency, county to county, and city to city. So that's why the data collection piece is very important. FirstNet, one of the tasks that they've given to us is to collect data from every agency that we can. And so from time to time, we will be asking you for data about how do you use data technology? How would you like to use it in the future? There's just a litany of things that we need to know as we plan for this. And now is a very, very important time so that we can gather that information. We can really see what is it that you need for buy-in to something like FirstNet. Once all that data is collected, it'll go into a network design, and that network design will eventually come in as way of a plan to the state governor of every state and those leaders in the territories. And then there's basically 2 options: the state plan to the governor, like we have done here in Colorado. We keep the governor informed, one of the reasons why we're in the Governor's Office of Information Technology. And we are your conduit out there between not only FirstNet, but the state of Colorado and the governor's office, so that he can really get his finger on the pulse of what you need. Once that plan comes to the governor from FirstNet, The governor has the option to either opt into the plan and say, yeah, we like what we have as far as coverage and capacity and all the different nuances of the plan, or the governor can say, no, we're going to build our own radio access network. At that point, Colorado will be responsible to build its own radio access network that will connect back to the FirstNet core. A lot of people ask us, how and when is this going to happen? We're not really sure. We think that sometime within the years of 2016, 2017, or some time beyond, we should have that plan in front of the governor.
As Ed mentioned, that adoption of the FirstNet state plan versus Colorado building its own radio access network is going to be a key input, or a key process that not only the FirstNet governing body, which we'll touch on shortly, but you as local stakeholders will need to participate in. We're providing you this update in September of 2015, and FirstNet expects to go to RFP at the beginning of 2016. We anticipate that RFP process taking through most of that year, and then state plans would likely not get to the states until 2017. FirstNet has said publicly that they will likely not deploy the network until 2018. And it won't be until the state plan is proposed that we would have any idea around cost or coverage specifically. But we know, and FirstNet knows, that if they don't provide a compelling cost similar to what you're already paying in your personal lives or by your agency, and if they don't provide comparable coverage, then the odds of a public safety agency adopting the network may be limited.
So one of the things that we've been doing for data collection is on our webpage, which we'll show you in the end. It's www.firstnetcolorado.org. We have a way for you to go in and give us that data that we've been talking about. So up in your upper right-hand corner there, we're right now just looking for users and devices, usage stats. You know, how do your service plans work? What do you expect from those plans? And any barriers that you might have in adoption of a network such as FirstNet.
The other piece that we're working on, and this is all to inform FirstNet's RFP process in the short term and in the long term as we negotiate with FirstNet about what Colorado's network could look like. We will be doing comprehensive coverage objectives and coverage modeling. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a coverage objectives map that FirstNet proposed based on a series of data elements. The red, green, and blue represent the density of data points. It does not, in fact, represent an implementation schedule or prioritization of coverage. But we do believe that this map is inadequate and these coverage objectives would not meet the needs of Colorado. So we are coming out to the 64 counties and 2 tribes again to discuss what those coverage objectives might look like. One of the data elements to help us inform that is CAD, computer-aided dispatch, or incident data. In the lower left-hand corner, you'll see Mesa County depicting CAD incidents, which are those dark blue dots, using proposed broadband coverage, which is the light blue. And then there's some red hash marks, which you may or may not be able to see, that represent proposed where sites might be. We're actually, as you transition to the lower right-hand corner, we're using a number of potential broadband assets. They could be existing telecom towers or sites, or they might be what we call community anchor institutions, which are buildings like county or city buildings. They might be hospitals or fire stations, police stations, schools, libraries, where a network could be deployed and where we can get the best bang for our buck in terms of an overall network design. And we really do want to look at what public assets could provide in terms of giving Colorado the best network possible. FirstNet, the ability for states to interact with FirstNet through an official notice process in the Federal Register has been ongoing and will be ongoing through this process. Colorado has participated in multiple notice responses, and all of those can be found on our website. We just wanted to highlight a couple of things. In the second notice process, which was really around the state plan and radio access network, where the state has to determine if we'll connect to FirstNet or provide our own radio access network, we gave input about Colorado believing that that needs to be a largely locally controlled process. And there needs to be a clear process for us to be able to respond to, first to understand what FirstNet has provided and to respond appropriately. And then the most recent third notice included the definition of a public safety entity. So FirstNet is trying to finalize what that use of the network might look like and who would be using it. We've got traditional public safety entities like law, fire, and EMS and emergency management, but we believe in order to drive down cost and drive adoption and really effectively interoperate and share information, that public safety definition needs to be looked at broadly, as Ed mentioned earlier, everybody from education to hospitals to federal partners to state partners to utilities. So if you're interested in those responses, please go to our website and you can read more. Lastly, we wanted to share with you that Colorado does have a governing body that's representative of all of the disciplines and levels of government and actively participates in Colorado's planning process. They are available for you as a stakeholder if you don't want to interact with the state necessarily and you really do want to get a local approach. Our chair is Chief Eric Tade with Denver Fire. He represents the Colorado State Fire Chiefs Association. And our vice chair is Councilman Bob Pfeiffer from the city of Arvada, who represents the Colorado Municipal League. Councilman Pfeiffer is one of 2 elected officials on our board. The other elected official is Commissioner Kathy Chandler Henry from Eagle County, who represents the Colorado Counties, Inc., or CCI. As I mentioned, we have representation across disciplines, which includes Police Chief Joe Ribeiro from Manitou Springs. It represents Chief Randy Lesher from Poudre Valley EMS, and he represents the MSAC. We have representation from Sheriff Chad Day with Yuma County of the Colorado Sheriff's Organization. We also have representation from First Responder Organized Labor through Deputy Fire Chief Mark Krapp of West Metro Fire, and then rural Colorado is representation through Paula Creasy with Grand Junction Police Department. Additionally, we have 3 state representatives, Brian Shepard, who's the state single point of contact for FirstNet, representing OIT. We have Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, which is Lyle Moore, and then the Colorado Department of Public Safety, Don Nacarado. We recently added a 911 representative, Carl Stevens with Garfield County, and then both tribes have representation, Kathy Gurley from the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and Councilwoman Regina Lopez White Skunk from the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. And then last we have ADCOM 911, represented by their Executive Director, Joel Estes. ADCOM has a seat on our board because they actually are host to one of the 5 pilot public safety broadband networks that exist across the country. So it's really important that they provide input. They are one of 5 entities providing real-life, real-time information on how a future network will operate back and providing that information back to FirstNet.
And as we close, we just want to let you know, if you'd like to learn more about FirstNet, the national website is at www.firstnet.gov. That's firstnet.gov. And our team here, state of Colorado, we have put up a website specifically for you, and that's at firstnetcolorado.org. That's firstnetcolorado.org. You'll find all kinds of information in there, the information that Kim was talking about the notices, as well as every presentation that we've done, and really kind of the history from FirstNet's inception until the present day, as well as what our migration has been as far as a team here working for you every day. We put in as much information as we can, things that you think that we think are important to you, and so we ask you to come in and visit often and give us your feedback if there's things you'd like to see in there that are not there. Also, we send out every 28 to 31 days a newsletter, and this is just to inform you. We know you have a busy schedule, and so we want to give you just really the highlights for a month. And so you can go to our website at firstnetcolorado.org, and you can sign up for the newsletter. If you're in on one of our live presentations, we will automatically add you to the list. And we think it's great information, and we appreciate you joining us there. Also, we have all the feeds. We have Twitter feeds, and as we've talked about, we have videos on YouTube. But here's our Twitter feed at FirstNet CO, and we ask you to go in if you want to see what's going on up to the moment. You can find us there. We try to use every means that we can that's physically possible so that we can give you as much information as possible.
Wanted to provide you our contact information. As mentioned earlier, Brian Shepard is FirstNet's single point of contact for the state of Colorado, and he is also the broadband program manager within OIT. That provides a great synergistic opportunity for Colorado's broadband planning, both rural, privately or commercially, as well as from a public safety perspective, to ensure that we understand what's occurring across Colorado's landscape and we're planning in an effective, efficient, and elegant manner. You'll see our contact information, as well as John Davey, who's our project coordinator on the FirstNet team, and then Megan Chadwick, who works on rural broadband and is the broadband communications manager under Brian. We wanted to thank you for the opportunity to present this information to you today, and we also want to let you know that our ability to do that was funded by the NTIA under this grant award. However, they don't necessarily, meaning the federal government, endorse or support anything we've just shared with you.
Please, if you want to contact us, please look at our information. And if you'd like to have a presentation, we would love to come out and speak with your agency, your county, your city, your tribe. Please don't hesitate to give us a call if you have any questions, comments, or any concerns. Thank you again, as Kim said, for your participation in this event today.